No one gets to win trauma.
Elite performance coach Annalie Howling is on Intentional Living with Courtney Myers, talking trauma.
People are walking around with unhealed trauma thinking it's not big enough. Like I almost don't deserve to feel badly about it.
Anxiety.
You don't have to share everything.
Perfection.
Really, what that comes down to is validation.
And
I'm actually not going to tread that carefully around this.
what it means to finally live shame-free.
Shame thrives in the shadows, and just know that all of you as you are now belong in the light.
We're getting fireworks on your side right now for some reason. Wow, that's the universe talking to us on an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Myers. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Myers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Myers starts now. Hi, Annalie. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Myers. I'm so honored to get to talk to you today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really joyful to be in this space with you as well.
Yay. So I think I want to jump right in on this topic. I actually saw you before we jumped on posting about it, and it really just triggered something in me. And I think we all do it, or a lot of us do it, is this concept of playing small. And I think we're doing it to fit in. And I was just telling you before I pushed record that this quote keeps coming up in my feed, and it makes me laugh every time. It says, stop boring God with your little tiny visions. And I think that's brilliant. It's not that anything is too small for God. And I know that for me, I spent so much of my life going, I just want to be normal. I just want to find my husband and have my kids and my family. But then, you get it all and it's but I want more. So I don't know why we do this to ourselves. And I know you work with a lot of people trying to finally push past their barriers and their limitations and their boundaries. But why do we play so small?
Okay, so I think there's a couple of reasons, and we can kind of unpack a few of them because I want to be as useful as possible here. So one is that when we've maybe got something that we want to do, like a really big change, it does mean exactly that. It means we're not just going to take on a new project at work, or we're not just going to, get really fit, embrace a fitness regime. It means we're going to make a lot of changes in our life. Like if you're going to dedicate yourself to a new way of working out, say, and that includes a new diet, and you're going to follow a program or whatever it might be, you're going to have to make changes. You're going to have to say no to the bottomless brunch, and you're going to have to say no to, certain events or things because you're dedicating yourself in this way. And it means a lot of change. So there's something in that I think we almost don't want to be seen to be selfish because we're making a priority of something that we're serving our needs. So that's definitely one. Another one is the inner critic, which is that little voice in your, the little devil on your shoulder, the saboteur, the voice there, which is that it's designed to keep us safe. So I talk about this a lot, but I believe it to be a well-meaning friend that's just got it a bit wrong in its communication. So it's quite unskillful in comms, but well-meaning inside. And what it's trying is just pull you back to keep you safe. And the only way it knows how to do that is to do what you've always done, aka the comfort zone. So as soon as you're about to break out the comfort zone, think about when you've taken an exam, or you've courageously asked somebody out on a date, or you've done something you wouldn't normally do and you pushed yourself out of that comfort zone, you've gone and lifted that weight in the gym or whatever it might be. And just before that, you're getting oh God, what if, oh no, oh, these people might laugh at you, or what will happen, or that friend might not like you. And that's the inner critic. That's the inner critic, again, just got you by the collar, just trying to pull you back into that comfort zone because that's the only way it knows how to keep you safe. So a bit like an overbearing parent, oh, be careful. But I've got kids, you've got to let them have a little fall here and there, as awful as it is, so that they learn and they're getting back up. I do work, thank you for mentioning that, with a lot of sort of elite performers in sports, business, Hollywood, things like that, very similar to your industry as well. And with everybody that I work with, and I include myself in this purely from an age perspective, so I'm 40 and a half, and the more successful you become, I think it can make you more conservative. And that's because you have more to lose. So it's a very different energy. I remember when I first started out, and I wonder about yourself, like when you first start out in the industry, and yours, I imagine, was pretty dog eat dog, right? Like you had to kind of scrap and make a difference. Yeah, you've really got to like get in there and be noticed. And to do that, you do bold and courageous things, right? You take risks effectively. Now, that's amazing when you're maybe in like your early 20s and you're flat sharing and you haven't got children or a mortgage or, whatever it might be that we start accumulating on our success ladder. And so the problem with that is when you get the stuff or things, just simply responsibilities, right? I'm a single parent, I've got to look after my daughter. When you start taking those risks that you did before, you get the, because there's just more to it than that. So I think that the success making us more conservative and therefore changing that sort of hunger, chasing energy into I must keep this, I can't lose it. It's a very, very, very different energy. And then the last one want to throw in here is a book that I read quite recently. And it's by a guy called Oliver Burkeman, and it's called 4,000 Weeks. And 4,000 weeks is, if we live to 80, that's how many weeks you have on this earth. So with me at 42, I'm over halfway, in theory, of my 4,000 weeks. And so what he talks about here is that effectively as humans, we have this like underlying existential sort of knowledge that is our cutoff point, if you like, that we haven't got forever. So what that means paradoxically is, with regards to taking these leaps, we haven't got the time to get it wrong. So, if we lived into a 200, 300, you could have every kind of relationship you could imagine. You could have kids, you could get married, you could not get married, you could live all over the world, you could backpack for years, you could still have a high profile career in TV. You could do everything more than once and it kind of wouldn't matter. But because we have this sense of this time, it actually makes us procrastinate and fear even more making the wrong choice, because we have this overriding sense that we are so limited. So these are sort of some of the factors that I think are at play day to day. And it's just quite interesting to unpack if I'm finding myself procrastinating or not taking a risk that I normally would, checking in around one of those and where am I at today?
Well, it almost seems like a lot of these that you're saying is almost counterintuitive to success or reaching goals or really like realizing our true potential. Because if you don't take that risk, how did you get to where you are in your 40s? I'm 41 too, so I get it. Yeah. At 20, I would do anything. I would work every night, do everything to be at the top of my game. And now, I don't think I've totally lost that. I'll work my butt off for something I really am passionate about. But like, if you're not willing to take that risk, how are you going to get that reward? Like, do we need to curate some of that younger self in us to help us like push past these boundaries of these things? Also, when you're talking about energy and like holding on so tight, doesn't that like just repel everything?
Totally. And it's so exhausting. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation, maybe a bad relationship that's going wrong or a friendship that's declining or even a really toxic work environment. I burnt out in a toxic work environment, and most people of our group have a story around that, and younger. And it was because, exactly as you just said, I was holding on and I was trying. And there was no lack of energy or effort or hours going in, but it was so unaligned to my soul. That was not the role of my soul. And so you can pour as much into that as you want, but it was just pouring out the other side. It's like a leaky bucket. It was just awful for me. It made me really unwell. Whereas, exactly to your point, when we look at purpose, which gives us energy, more often it is related to things that we loved when we were younger. It is related to, I'm a type A, seems like you are. I work hard. I don't mind that. But I will not have I can put a whole day aside to write. I'm writing a book at the moment as well. And I can put a whole day aside for something. And if I'm not engaged, if it's not, for whatever reason, it could be external factors, but if I'm not really there, I could sit there for 8 hours and have nothing. But if I'm like, in the right space and I'm engaged in what it is that I'm doing, which for me is an act of service, and I know it's for the greater good in some way, it's just going to flow. And I don't mind late nights. I don't mind burning the candle in all the ways either. I'm not afraid of hard work, but I am afraid of bad work. And I think that's a big distinction.
Well, I think you're saying something really key there, like passion and purpose, doing something in service. Like, we have to find that combination, because that's what really allows us to tick. Because I think what we're talking about when we're playing it small, we're not following, our passion. We're not following our purpose. We're not following that alignment of our soul wherever we're supposed to be going. And then that's what I think maybe where we feel that stuckness, because it's like, I have to do this. I have to take care of my family. I have to pay my mortgage. But I mean, I just feel like that's a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for unhappiness. It's a recipe to not feel fulfilled. It's a recipe for even resentment.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Hi everyone. Long-term relationships. Yeah. Like, have the keeping score in the background. I mean, relationships burn out. Let's be honest. Like, we burn out at work, we burn out in relationship, we burn out in dynamics. And absolutely, if this is not something that you're, relationships, if we're lacking appreciation, fulfillment, connection, that's going to burn out and become toxic. And that's the same when we look at work environments or anything that we're dedicating our time to. And you can burn out doing things that you love as well. Like, I have a young daughter. I love her dearly, but that can be depleting and exhausting. So it doesn't mean I don't passionately adore that girl and she's part of my life's purpose, but you can absolutely burn out doing things that you love too. And people that work particularly in nurturing and caregiving roles, like teachers and healthcare professionals, the burnout rate there is insane. And not because, the hours are often hard and unforgiving, but also because you're in a role, and always have been, of one of giving over to others and caring. So yeah, there's so much in this, but to cultivate, I mean, I've learned, and it's funny, the older I get, almost the more simple it gets. Doesn't mean that my brain's, but I find things more, and this sounds like a really horrible word, but I don't mean it badly. Like, this is an energetic term, but things just become quite repellent to me quite quickly. As in, I have a client come to me and I just think, do you know what? Like, I personally can't do this because it's going to take too much from me. And maybe it's just a part of their journey they're on, that it's not quite right, and I'm not the right person to be in service of them just then. Or a project that might come in, or maybe a brand wants to work with me, and it could be lucrative and great, but it's going to take from it. And I've just become very, very, very aware of that. So that's something that I'm sort of personally working on and tuning more into. But absolutely, to your point, I love that you said that. I'm more the girl I was teens and early 20s, but with the autonomy of a woman in her 40s. And it's really cool to kind of be there now.
So how do we find that alignment? Like, how are you finding it?
So, thankfully, I think, as I say, this sort of energetic shift I'm becoming more aware of it. My body will tell, and I actually think most people's do. I think there was a post that went up last week that I did, which is, let's just be honest here. There are some relationships, and people aren't bad people, generally speaking, but we might go into a dynamic just because we always have, or that's how we've always done it. But you come away from there low. And I've just got better at not doing that. Doesn't mean I'm not going to see that person, but maybe I change how I interact with them. Perhaps it's only in a group setting. Perhaps it's in a morning. Perhaps it's always outside of my home, or, something like that, or on a walk, or, whatever it might be, maybe changing some of the scenarios and settings, and also just getting a much better understanding of what I need and putting that first. So with the book writing, for example, I've had to become quite selfish. I've got my daughter, I've got my book, I've got my job, I've got my clients, and I need to make those things work. So I'm going to be a bit of a hermit for the next 4 months, to be honest. And that's okay. And I'm going to tell people that I love, that's what's happening. And the people that love me go, no drama, tell me what you need. And that's how it's going to be for the next 4 months. So I think I've also got a lot better at creating these spaces for myself. And then that's where I'm also able to be more authentically me.
I love that. And I love that you can tell people that, but I don't think it's always well received, even from the people we love. And that kind of comes back into the playing it small. Like, I feel like a lot of the times, like, people outside of us don't always understand, like, your dreams, your desires, your goals. And they don't need to. It's not theirs. But sometimes that is not respected in that way of, like, you could say, I'm going to be a hermit for the last 4 months, but we want you here. We want you here. We want you here. Like, I don't always see that reciprocated or that understanding. So how do we navigate those scenarios when we know that that's what we need, but it's not really well received?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in that. I mean, if I was being a bit with it, like kind of decisive, that's their stuff, not mine, not yours. It's like that's lovely. The other thing is, like, more than one thing can be true at once. So it's amazing that you want me to be a part of your social event, celebrations. I've been invited to things. I really like that so much. And I've got wonderful friends that through going through my divorce, there was never a dinner party that I wasn't invited to on my own, and I value that so much. And those friends are just incredible. So there's part of it that's lovely that they want you there because they enjoy your company. But there's also a part of, well, what is it that I'm providing for you that maybe you haven't got yourself? I've had a few incidences recently of people that I'm actually not going to tread that carefully around this because I've sort of had to make a few decisions about it. But evidently, there's I'm not going to be careful about it. But evidently, there's something in it for them, and it's become apparent that it's not a friendships flux. It's not always equal. Sometimes I've got more. Sometimes someone else has got more with long-term friendships. But there are some dynamics that I've become aware of that it's very much something that somebody wants from me, and if they're not getting it, they're actually being not even just passive aggressive, quite aggressive. So I haven't got the time for that. It's just do you know what, and maybe that's just a bad period of time that you're having, and I'm going to create some space, and this doesn't have to be terminal or anything like that, but right now that is not for me to deal with this. So yes, I've also been doing that. And I think as well, if anybody's listening to this and they're going through that, because friendship breakups are devastating, they can be the betrayals. And I think especially as women, I'm just going to speak to this because fortunately as women, we do share so much with our female friends, which is great. I went to an amazing talk last week in London with a guy called Paul Brunson and my wonderful friend Emma Louise Boynton, and they were talking about 3 a.m. friends. And this is in London, this data. But a 3 a.m. friend is someone that you could call at 3 a.m. and just say, I'm really in a bad way, whatever. And how many people would be with you, stay on the phone with you, come to you straight away. And as women in London, it's 3. We have 3 a.m. friends each, which actually is quite amazing. And I think that's really reassuring. For men, it's 0. They have none. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, which is heartbreaking. And that's a whole other section to male mental health and feeling alone and behaviours and everything else that comes with that. But for this conversation and having this connection, the beautiful thing about female friendships is we do share, we are there for each other, we give. The difficulty with that is when it turns toxic. If it turns toxic and there's a betrayal, it is devastating, and there's a lot of layers to it.
Well, I think that devastation, it's like a mourning. It's like any sort of breakup, but also there's also needs to be like an understanding and growth process in any relationship. And I think that's where we find ourselves in this position of a breakup, whether it's romantic or friendship or any sort of relationship in our life, is that like there needs to be a growth pattern together, which is kind of leading me back into like the whole idea of like playing it small. Like we need to consistently be growing. And if we don't all grow at that same rate, so it can, so it can cause these rifts, and it's really hard to repair that growth or those rifts when you're growing apart. And I don't believe it's anyone's fault. We are all on our own journey, but it is definitely hard to stomach, especially as women who care immensely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, there's usually a couple of things. So if somebody isn't cheering for you, they could very well be having something going on in their own lives and you don't know about it yet, is what I would say. Quite a lot of the time, maybe they're just not ready to say that, you having a lovely new partner and being really happy about that. Maybe they haven't yet shared that their marriage is splintering. And so they're not...
Right.
So there's definitely that, and you find out a little bit later on, you think, I understand why you couldn't share with me. I understand now. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt in the moment, but that you can give some peace to that. And again, look across the tenure of the relationship and the individual, and someone's integrity is what they consistently do. So if that's kind of inconsistent for that friend, that dynamic, you're like, okay, this is interesting. I wonder what's up with them. If it's a dynamic or a situation where that person is generally speaking, you vibe when they're kind of in a better place and maybe you're not, or if you're like second in command, again, there's some consistency in that dynamic. And that's just, it doesn't mean we don't have to be friends with these people, doesn't mean we don't spend time with them, but you choose how you would like to do that. And then latterly, just because perhaps you were super close with somebody, if they're not cheering for you, you don't have to share everything. Like, that's the other thing. You don't have to share everything in that moment. Like, you can, you can choose who you share your news.
Well, that's a hard one. Boundaries are hard to create when you are accustomed to sharing everything.
Yeah, yeah. And that is one, again, so that would be an inquiry for me, is that for you that you need to share everything? Is it because you feel you need to do that, almost like political capital to sort of put in the slot machine of that relationship? Is that what it thrives on? That you need to be sharing these things to keep that relationship alive? Because that could just be another inquiry about, like you say, a transitional point in that dynamic. Like if we're just kind of meeting up and all we're doing is like sharing like newsworthy tidbits, you know, using your industry and maybe about other people, and let's be honest, we're going into gossip as well. If that's what the relationship is now founded on, maybe that's one that needs a shift, like I say, to a group setting or you know, a different dynamic or an environment or something like that. Or maybe it's just in a different state of flux or stagnation right now, which can happen too. So yeah, I would use those lines of inquiry around the boundary setting. If somebody's crossing your boundaries and they, oh, but I must know, I need you here. Like if they're not, say, I use my example that I'm going to be a bit absent, not for the major things, but generally speaking, I just have only got so much finite resource for the next few months. You know, if people were really upset about that, you know, let's dig into why.
You know, what's really funny as you're talking about this, I'm thinking about my own relationships and my own oversharing. And like, there's a point where you can share and there's a point where you can overshare. And I am horrible in that overshare department. I've spent so much of my time oversharing that now that I've started to create more boundaries and I just decided to hold things in that don't need to be shared right away, it has definitely affected the style of my relationships quite a bit. But it's been brought to my attention that I overshare because it's an anxiety response. Because, you know, I deal with anxiety, you feel this need to share. So like, how do we deal with that and keep it like in a healthy way to share and exchange ideas and what's going on in your life, but like not overdo it?
Well, firstly, thank you for saying that, because I know that an awful lot of people feel that way. And I've definitely felt that way in the past. And it's almost like I needed to, it's like coming to a party and bringing a gift. You wouldn't turn up to somebody's house empty-handed. And it's almost like you need to bring something. And really what that comes down to is validation. It's like sort of a feeling of unworthiness in some way. Or, you know, we talk about unconditional love a lot. And the idea of that is that as you stand here, as I sit here, as you sit there, exactly as we are, you know, me on a dark, rainy Sunday night in London, you know, that I am worthy of unconditional love in this moment. Not, oh, let me wash my hair or put something pretty on, or get my gym gear. And the same for yourself. So when we turn up to a meeting with a friend or a romantic partner or something, there's nothing you need to do. You don't need to be perfect. And I think a lot with women as well, we feel that we need to, you know, maybe we've entered a friendship or a dynamic. And as you said, that was the historical sort of flow of the relationship. And because you were offering more. And also speaking, it's clever. Your body's clever. So talking is a way of you discharging stress. So you're feeling anxious. Anxiety is a stress response. You can't, well, you could, but you're not jumping up and down on the spot to get it out or doing some tapping or whatever else it might be, or smashing back 10 tequilas when you might be before you meet somebody. But, you know, these are all, talking and getting it out is a way of discharging stress. So another technique would be, if you find yourself in some dynamics that are quite anxiety inducing, I can't tell you how good going on a walk is, because you're side by side with somebody rather than eye to eye, which can actually be if you do have anxiety, that can be it's a very vulnerable position. It's very intimate and it can exacerbate those sensations. So if you're going on a walk, you're side by side, so you're still connected, you're still in connection and relationship with that person. You're walking along, so your eyes are scanning the horizon. This is bilateral eye movement, a bit like the EMDR that I think we might touch on, which is very clever. Also, while you have good chats in the car while you're driving, you know, like when you speak to your partner about the things you want to talk about, because you're scanning the horizon, you're sat side by side. And the other thing is with going for a walk is you're physically moving, so your body is actively discharging stress. So those are sort of good reasons to do that. But just if it helps, one of the reasons that you might go into that stress response, which is what it is potentially some feelings of probably historical behavior, maybe some stuff around self-worth and needing, like I say, think about that, going to the party to the hostess and handing her, a lovely gift because she's hosting something. So it's the information that we're giving, but also it's a way of you discharging the stress of what you're feeling in that situation.
It's really interesting because if you find yourself in that position, is it, because I will say for me, historically, that has been across the board in almost every single one of my relationships, whether it's been family, friends, partners, anything, it's almost like, as you're saying it, I'm thinking, have I ever really truly felt comfortable enough to show up authentically as myself? And then it makes you think of like the quality of these relationships and how do we come back to that comfort of who we truly are? And that whole concept of unworthiness or perfection, like, it's like layers. And like we said, I'm 41. This is like nothing new to me. It's been my entire life. It's like, how do we find our way back to ourselves so that we can find that worthiness, that authenticity, that we do feel okay to show up as we are and be accepted?
I think that self-reflection, however you may wish to do that, is the most powerful tool. So if it is journaling, if it's using some of the beautiful products that are available that sort of allow you to dive deeper, if people listening are in the privileged enough position to work with a good therapist or someone that you might enjoy therapy, or even, a spiritual teaching or something like that, that's going to get you to reflect. But it's, most of us are afraid of being alone with ourselves. And that is very, very different to being lonely. So, I could be lonely because I'm making up an example, like maybe I haven't gone out this weekend and I'm being dismissed, like, Murder, She Wrote. And, I could be a bit like, I feel a bit lonely. I haven't seen anyone. That's very different to I'm afraid of being alone with myself, with me, with my thoughts. Again, this sensation of unconditional love for me, if I use it in that sense, and kind of quite a spiritual sense of just exactly who I am right now, standing here today, feeling enough. It's really different. And we don't tend to inquire as to what makes us up. And I am the sum of many parts. That's something that I've learned through my self-reflection journey. I speak about this very openly, but I'm very sexually motivated. I'm a very sexual, sensual woman. It's a really important part of my life. It was a big learning journey I went on, and I still feel very drawn to that today. I'm very spiritual. I geek out on leadership. Like, I geek out. I love going out with my friends and being a bit unhinged and having fun. I value really intimate relationship. I'm a fun mum. Like, and I do my work, which is also quite incredibly serious and those sorts of things. And I have career aspirations and I'm ambitious as well. And over all of that, I believe I'm here to be of service to others, and I have a value of kindness. So that's a lot, right? And so, your anxiety is a part potentially of who you've been, or it's a signal that's coming to you. And anxiety is a future. Usually it's a future feeling, present and future. You don't feel anxiety in the past, you feel guilt about the past. Why did I do that? Why did I hang, like the as Brene Brown calls it, the vulnerability hangover? Why did I overshare? Why did I go there and overshare and say that thing? Why did I do that? So that's kind of more guilt and maybe a little bit of shame about the past. Anxiety is more about like, or what's it going to be like, or will I say the wrong thing, or I'm feeling very uncomfortable in this position. That's only an element of something that you're experiencing now, and it can be an informative signal for us to look a bit deeper. But I would say for us to really understand that we are these different parts, and each of them need to be kind of nurtured and worn and adorned on our 40 years of skin and bones, and just kind of getting a bit more okay with the kooky, I guess. I'm quite an eclectic mix of different things, and that's okay, and each of them needs my attention at different times.
So it's kind of like treating that side of you as just, this is a part of me. And then let's come back to the present and who we are in this moment. I know a lot of times when I'm dealing with my anxiety, I'll always say, like, am I safe now? I'll talk myself through it. Am I safe? Am I here? Like, going through those motions just helps you come back to present. And like you said, even about with the walking, that left-right movement, I know is really good for your left brain, right brain. It's something about it balances you out. So how would you work in EMDR with this, because this is something I actually had a therapist talk to me about years ago when I was doing a consult with her, and we were going to do it. Unfortunately, my insurance at the time, I was in my 20s or maybe early 30s, wasn't going to cover it. And so I never actually got to experience it, but I know it has huge effects, especially with people with like PTSD and things like that. But I think it helps like across the board. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So I had a corporate career, very successful, had a massive burnout, like we were talking earlier, because I was pushing all my energy into something that wasn't aligned with my soul. I talk about this a lot. You know, I'm basically trying to avoid the truth. So I'm going for all of these like intolerance tests because I was so ill all the time and all of these kinds of things. And anyway, turns out I was just intolerant to my life. So I had to change something, and burnout brought that crashing down. So I think that was sort of 29, 30. And then a friend of mine, very good friend of mine, had just started doing coaching, and she had gone to the States to do it. And at the time in the UK, we're generally speaking, I'm going to stereotype, but I think it's okay, we're a couple of years behind the States when sort of a new modality comes out, something like that. So my friend did this fantastic visualization on me from coaching, which at the time was very woo-woo, and it wasn't like Wendy Rhodes in Billions. It was a bit like, what is this weird thing? And it was so profound and it was so amazing. And I was just like, right, this is it. And I have to I am type A, so I have to find out everything about this coaching thing. I need to know everything about it. So I went to the States, did my qualifications, did my certifications, did all the stuff. And I did that for years. I did coaching for years. I've coached at very, very high level, like, you know, CEOs, C-suite, self-made billionaires, like, you know, athletes. Got into the performance side of things, so learning a little bit more about the polyvagal theory, about our sympathetic nervous systems, you know, getting into all of that. But it was great. And coaching is amazing when you have a goal. So I want to get that promotion. I want to find a lasting relationship. I want to change my job. I want to find my life purpose. Like, coaching is awesome. However, if you're not doing some things that you want because there's an underlying limiting belief, which is I'm not worthy, I'm unlovable, I'm unsafe. That is trauma talking. It's actually shame. I am. That's shame language, which shame lives in you. But that's trauma. That's left behind from trauma. So to be honest, the universe just kept putting EMDR in my way. And it got to the point where I'm like, right, fine, okay, I'm listening. Came up so many times in about, I don't know how many, it was kind of ridiculous. And I was like, right, okay, fine. So I managed to find a course, again, which was super insane how that all came about, and a conversation on a plane with somebody, ended up doing it. And it was the missing piece of the puzzle for me personally. And then as soon as I'd done that, and I've kind of blended it together with a lot of the experience I've had of coaching and other things. But EMDR is a bilateral eye movement, so right to left if we're using eye movement, or you can tap if somebody either can't see or doesn't want to use their eyes. So that's both possible. It's still a bilateral stimulation, which is also where you can do tapping on yourself. And what it's doing is the prefrontal cortex, if people are just listening, I'm tapping my forehead, which is at the front of our brain. That's your cognition center, if you like. That's numbers, dates, times, you know, facts, like things that you need to buy from the shop. What do you need to do later? Those sorts of things. Now, your amygdala, your limbic system, which is towards the back of your brain, your lizard brain, if you like, is sort of the prehistoric area. That is where, when we're experiencing any kind of threat, that's what activates first. So we've heard about the trauma responses: fight, flight, or freeze. I think we're all quite familiar with those. The two we don't talk about so much are flop, pass out, fawn. Fawn is one that is, just trigger warning, I'm going to talk about sexual assault here. So fawn is one that's usually activated in victims of domestic violence, narcissistic relationships, sexual assault, whereby if we try to elicit any of the other four, it's not going to get us out of that situation. So the only one that might save our life, this is what trauma responses are for. You know, these are activated to keep us alive. Fawn might be the only one that's going to keep us safe. So when everyone's like, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you leave? This is often why we've been fawning, and fawn elicits a huge amount of shame because we don't understand why we did that when someone was being unkind or violent or, you know, the worst case scenarios. So the important thing to know is these responses are triggered way, way, way faster than your prefrontal cortex. You did not choose them. Your system chose for you. in a split second, your system, all the blood has come away from your prefrontal cortex, because we do not need to know where we're going later, what's in the diary, what time to pick the kids up. Don't need that. We're dying. What we need to do is not die. So this is as simple as it gets, if you like. So this part of our brain activates one of the 5 responses, sometimes more than one, if we think about a traumatic event. And then when we're, if you like, safe again, that's when we might start to have some of the cognition back. Now, although this part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, was offline, the blood was elsewhere, it's tagging. And this is where trauma is so clever, because it's kept us safe, and we may need some information for later. But for example, let's just say I was in a car accident and I froze because that was the trauma response that got elicited, and because I'm going to go on impact, and I froze, and there was a red car that crashed into us, and I was okay, went to hospital and everything a few weeks later, and I'm driving fine, and driving's not an issue. But I could find myself in a airport where it's crowded and busy, and I could see a flash of a red trolley or a suitcase or a scarf, or smell the aftershave of the person that was in the car, and I could be completely re-triggered and brought back to that moment and have an anxiety attack or a panic attack. Then I don't know why that's happening to me. Then I start going into shame. I am a failure. I am broken. I am unsafe. I am unworthy. And then what I start doing is I start living my life differently. I'm not taking that flight anymore. Or I'll only take a flight at night when it's quiet. Or I'll only sit in this seat. Or I only travel if this person's traveling. Or I just won't go by plane. I'll go by train. And then actually that's not very nice. Or I'll do it this way, or I'll start driving. And I'm sorry, I can't go on your bachelorette party, or I can't do that thing for work. And it starts growing roots. This grows roots and roots and roots trauma. So I had, and trauma, as you say, I mean, PTSD, we think about veterans, and I work with veterans of the armed forces. Having a conversation last night about going over to the Ukraine, because now is the right time, sadly, devastatingly, for me to go and do that. It's almost 2 years on, if you can believe it. But now is the right time to actually work through the trauma rather than the initial points when they just need aid, understandably. So now is the point that my work is of just devastatingly, but this is the time that I can add value later on down the line. It's how trauma works. So that's a conversation, something last night, to work with some veterans, amputees, helping people there and the families with the trauma of it. But this is why it comes out later. And I believe that all of us in some way have experienced some kind of trauma. I know I have. And it certainly wasn't anything like the atrocities of war, but the things that happened to me were affecting my view of myself. They were affecting my life. And we talk about playing small. My shame language was, I am helpless, I am hopeless, and I am weak. So that's a lens that I'm looking at my whole life through. So when I'm thinking about taking on a challenge, putting up a bold post, filming something for the internet, where I might get trolled or whatever else it might be, courageously starting a new relationship, putting my heart into something after divorce, like any of these things, if I was viewing my life through, I am helpless, hopeless, and weak, how can I trust that girl? So I'm going to make different choices. And that's also where understandably anxiety can live from, because shame is isolating. You don't want people to know that you think that way about yourself. Like, my friends won't like me if they know I'm helpless, hopeless, and weak, so I'm going to be perfect. A guy won't like me if I'm helpless, hopeless, and weak, so I'm going to be Miss Goddess, sexual being number one. A job won't want me if they know I'm helpless, hopeless, and weak, so I'll be ballsy and burn out because I'm doing so much extra, so they don't find out my shameful little secret that this is, not what I'm presenting. I'll be perfect, perfect, perfect. And then you crash. So that's sort of how trauma can manifest. And like I say, this I am language, like shame is so deeply entrenched in our bodies. I give the example of like as a mother, if I even say I am a bad mother, I feel physically unwell right now. That is too much for me to stomach. And that is me giving an example that I don't believe is true. I know I'm not a bad mother, but that kind of shame is almost intolerable to me to say it. And so people are living with shame. People have these I am statements. That's a lens we're viewing the world through. And inherently that's coming from trauma that somewhere has taken some roots in our system.
So you believe we all have some sort of trauma. It doesn't necessarily need to be, like you said, a sexual abuse or a car accident. It can be these minor, and I've heard it described as
salty victim.
Yeah, and complex PTSD and things like that. It can just be like something that was said to you as a child, or it could be just like a little thing that you've internalized and switched that I am statement or your perception of the world. And that can build. So it doesn't have, a lot of times when we talk about that trauma, it's like, oh, well, nothing bad happened to me in my life. I didn't have this, but it can just be that buildup of like these little things that we've internalized.
100%. And here's the thing, no one gets to win trauma. I gave the example of the people in the Ukraine that are going to go and help. And obviously that is just dreadful and devastating.
Yeah.
But then, the guys that went into war acting for their country, they'll obviously be, rehabilitating in those different ways, but they might not be suffering about that particular thing. It could be something else we're going to work through. I don't know that yet. And I have a lot of people coming to me that, particularly guys, I'm working with guys, say with very big jobs that have very nervous about public speaking, which is quite a normal phobia, right? But it often stems back to when they were asked to read in front of the class and they felt humiliated by a teacher. So we also fear humiliation. So this sort of social phobia, as we're calling it, it's humiliation, social humiliation and rejection we're fearing. So there's a lot about that. There's a lot of things from our childhood. I also have a lot of people come in when something happened. Trauma can be something you've witnessed, by the way, as well. It doesn't have to be something that happened to you. So you could witness something and you can take it on. And PTSD is defined as anything longer than 3 months as well. So yeah, it almost like sucks in after that point. Like, so let's use the car accident example again. Yeah. That could have been 3 years ago, but every time I see the police have pulled a car over, or I've read about something in the news, or I see, oh no, there's been an accident here, that gets my system's not differentiating from it happening to me. I'm being reactivated. It's opening my wound. It's reactivating my trauma. So I just don't want people listening to think, well, I didn't serve in the armed forces. And like I say, I sit on the board of a charity. So like, I'm absolutely, I would never charge a veteran. I don't believe there's anyone braver than veterans. And that's why I do it for free. But people are walking around with unhealed trauma, thinking it's not big enough. Like I almost don't deserve to feel badly about it. And if it's affecting your life, the way I describe it is when you look ahead to your future and you're like, oh, I'm going to do that job, or I'm going to manifest that relationship, or I'm going to move to this place or have this challenge. And you're looking at this beautiful vision, but then something drops into that path in front of you that's like, oh, but you don't like flying. Oh, but that person, you can't. Oh, that is what we need to get rid of. Like, that is something from your past that does not belong in your future vision.
So that trauma can actually create that limiting belief that's causing you from being able to achieve whatever it is. And I know you work with high achievers, and so, I mean, that is probably one of the biggest things that we don't even realize, because like what you're saying to me is that we can't logic our way out of any of this. It is so innate. It just happens and we have no control over it. And that's not to say we don't have control over our brain, our thoughts, where we're going in our life, but our body, which I think is huge. And I talk about spirituality a lot on the show. Our body does not lie. Our body holds this energy in, and like, we can do everything in our power. Even going back to your example of dieting, like, we can do every diet, every workout, everything in the book that we're supposed to do, but we might not be able to lose the weight because our body is reacting in a way to keep us safe and hold on to it. And that's what we're talking about with any trauma, limiting belief, anything.
Yeah, completely. Weight loss, absolutely. If you've got a limiting belief that you're not enough, or you've got a limiting belief that you're a failure, or you've got a limiting belief that you're weak, and you're trying to say stick to even like a healthy living plan, right? Of course it's going to like usurp those efforts, because you don't believe, or maybe you don't believe you're worthy of having, everything you want. So you sabotage. You've finally found this lovely relationship, and maybe you are having a lifestyle that suits you, and you've got a good opportunity at work. Like, if you like, I think it's Matthew McConaughey, green lights, all the lights are turning to green. And then you sabotage it because you're like, well, this is too good to be true. And these are childhood messaging often. That's quite a British one. Oh, it sounds too good to be true. Or nothing worth having comes easily. And, these are, don't get too excited. Don't get, this is good news. Don't get too excited, or your luck might run out. It's these sorts of things that then are from childhood. When we start even getting success, they can get reactivated. So, I mean, the thing is, I'm not saying that everyone must come and have EMDR. I mean, if you can, when I come to the States for the book, I'll come and do yours happily. Like, we'll do an episode before and after, like, oh, no problem. But It's awareness. It's just bringing it to the surface. And as the high priestess Brene says, and she's absolutely right, like the best thing, the best piece of advice, the best feeling is in the world is being free of shame. And I'm a shame-free vessel. I live my life as a shame-free vessel. I say things that not everyone's going to like. I do certain things in a way that fits me and maybe my eccentricities, but I live without shame. And because I know what that can do to my system, to my body, to what possibilities and opportunities in the universe and the vibration that lives in. And that is the best piece of work I've done. So again, I don't want this to be like, oh, you have to go and get a therapist and spend loads of money on it. And people, that's a privileged state to be in, but it's bringing awareness. So find a practice, I've got videos on YouTube. There's a class on my YouTube. It's free. Like that's about self-love. And I'll be putting more up. Like find people that you resonate with, follow their work, use it as a place to inquire from, and build this picture of yourself. And just know that belongs in the light. Shame thrives in the shadows. And just know that all of you, as you are now, belong in the light.
I mean, that sounds like, and we're getting fireworks on your screen right now for some reason. I was like, what is that? But let's get rid of the light. I mean, wow, that's the universe talking to us. But no, that shame. I mean, getting rid of that shame, getting rid of that guilt, getting rid of those feelings, almost seems like an unattainable level of peace that sounds it literally sounds like heaven. It's like, if you want to live heaven on earth, it sounds like that. So how does EMDR help us do that? Like, what does it do exactly?
Okay. Yeah. So we go into an event and then we look for the worst moment. And I describe it to clients as like that Polaroid picture moment. It's a flashback, and it could be half a second, it could be 5 minutes, but you see it so clearly, and you have the visceral sensation of, that you get the feelings in your body, and it's as if you're there again, however old you were, however long ago it was. When we've got that, we will then get the underlying limiting belief, which is the I am. So let's say I am bad, I am a failure. When we've got hold of that, and the worst moment, we'll do the processing, which is either the eye movement or it's tapping. But because it's bilateral stimulation, so your prefrontal cortex is online. So we're having the emotion, we're having the visceral, we're having the, if you like, the amygdala, we're having the sensations, the physical feelings of it again. But because we've got the prefrontal cortex going with us, we're able to complete the cycle, and you have a new lens, if you like, in there. So the memory becomes discharged, and you're able to view it. I mean, I have people sat in the chair within I do it in one session, 90 minutes, and this can be for anything, and like I've heard some really truly things that I didn't believe humanity was capable of, but there we go. And in 90 minutes, someone has such a different lens for themselves and total self-compassion, which they didn't have before. And it's as if you're viewing a film. So rather than it happening to you and you having the sensation, it's outside of you. So you're able to, and then also you're able to look at it. I've had people that their parents have died in front of them and things like that. And obviously very harrowing things that have happened. So the thought of even just being with it is understandably unbelievably triggering and really difficult. But when this event feels outside of yourself, you're suddenly able to look at it. You're able to see the scene differently. You're able to see your role in it differently, and you see yourself in it differently. And that's what this work does, is it cultivates self-compassion. And then we put in a different belief that you would rather have about yourself instead. So for me, my underlying limiting belief was helpless, hopeless, and weak. And I've had put back into my system, I am brave. And that comes up in different things now. It sounds really silly, but when I first got divorced, I'd never put air in my tyres of my big car. I'd never done that. Like I did, and it sounds really, and I didn't know how to do it. And I've Googled it, and I felt embarrassed, and I would have probably found a reason to go to the garage rather than, like, how can I say I don't know? And in the end, I walked up the road to my neighbours, and they were like, oh my God, okay. We had a family outing. There were 4 of us that went, and they were all arguing about how they like to do it best. And, but it sounds ridiculous, but that's something I wouldn't have admitted to before. I would have been too ashamed that I didn't know, and that's one tiny example. But the point being, the chain of like positivity builds. You view this event as something outside of yourself. So you're able to be with the event as well. You get self-compassion. You view you in a different way. And there are things that I've had processed out from my past. Unfortunately, I grew up in a very violent household, and I almost struggle now to get that memory. And honestly, those are things that really live with me almost daily, like some of the harrowing trauma of like violence from my parent, you know, and it's like, and now I would struggle to get that image. I'd struggle to get hold of it. It feels so far away from me.
Wow. I mean, what a life-changing experience, because what we're all doing here in general is living life through a lens, living life through our perception, living, you know, we can be going through we can have the exact same experience, but we're all going to process it so differently because we all have this individual lens that we're living our life through. So, I mean, that just goes to say, like, you know, a small trauma, a tiny T trauma or a big T trauma, it doesn't really matter. It's our perception of it. And if this can erase that, what a valuable tool.
I mean, in my opinion, it's unbelievable. Be very careful the practitioners you go to. I mean, in the UK, it's more regulated. I know in the States, you know, the healthcare system is slightly different. Like, yeah, check with a good practitioner, like get some good recommendations. But with the right people, it's exceptional. The differences I've seen, the testimonials I've had, you know, and that's not me blowing my own trumpet. I know I do a good job because I've had it myself, and I know that I'm very precise in everything that I do. So I know that it's safe for me. But there are some amazing practitioners. Like, I have my therapist that does it for me, you know, and just for people listening, watching, this is resonating, you know, exactly to your point, like The Untethered Soul, which I'm sure you must have read, and Michael Singer and our lovely spiritual teachings. He says that you can have twins that would have a completely different perception, experience, life, that could have been raised the exact same way. And you're not going to be having the same experience. And, you know, just to give yourself, even the first step being self-compassion, that, okay, do you know what? I want to unpack this. I just want to learn more about myself. I want to bring some light and some awareness to this, and find one person that you feel happy sharing even 5% with. Because that's how I started. Like, my marriage was going down the toilet, and I was really, really good, because I'm a coach, don't forget. So I'm really good at asking questions and keeping people talking and not talking about me ever, you know, like, how are you? Yeah, how are you? Oh my God, tell me about this. How are the kids? How's this thing? Really, really good at keeping the conversation going and no one coming near me, because I won't lie. I'll never lie. So, but I'm pushing a conversation away from me. And I remember being in Vienna with one of my best friends, and I said, actually, I'm not okay. And she was devastated, bless her. She was so upset. She just said, I can't believe I didn't notice. I can't believe that this has been going on for so long and you've been feeling that on your own. And I said, darling, I didn't let you know, because I felt so ashamed. I didn't let you know. I wasn't allowing you to see this part of me. And so that opened the start of that particular conversation that I was feeling very deeply ashamed about. And then from there, you know, you realize, actually, this went okay. You know, it's not an easy thing. Life wasn't easy unpacking that, but the release of that shame was amazing. And I think when you do that, and like I say, when you kind of clear the vessel, there ain't no going back.
Wow. So how do we get in touch with you? How do we work with you? How do we follow along so that we can be notified of your book and all the good things?
Thank you so much. So the biggest platform is Instagram, which is at Annalie Howling, which I started on one of the lockdowns here because I wanted to put out good free advice. There's quite a lot of videos and podcast recommendations and things like that on there, and things that people can do. There is a TikTok, doesn't get a lot of love because I get confused by it, but that will be getting reinvigorated. Same name. And then YouTube is what we're spending some more time on, which is, and I really go into trauma responses on there. I'm doing a lot of longer form videos, just try and really explain this stuff. There's, like I said, there's a Decoding Self-Love masterclass on there with a really beautiful visualization on there. It's stunning, where you get to meet your wise older self. It's amazing. And it's like really dreamy. Like, it's Sunday night for me now, but like, it's perfect, like Sunday night vibes, and you can do that as many times as you want. And on my website, if somebody wants to, I created, as part of my healing journey, a self-reflection guide. And I broke it into like sections around self, around relationship, around family, around history. And I've made that available. So that's online as well, that if somebody, again, wants to download that and wants to work through that themselves, that's on my website, annalehowling.com. But I travel a lot. I do come to the States a lot, and I do see people in person as well for the actual EMDR. But like I say, just find one thing that you feel ashamed about, give it awareness, bring it out into the light, and we let it go.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your stories and all this wonderful information. It was lovely being able to talk and connect with you today.
Thank you so much. I've adored it.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Myers. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Annalie Howling, for such a brilliant and eye-opening conversation all around EMDR, moving past our limiting beliefs, moving past our traumas, and really living a life that we feel worthy of. If you want to connect with Annalie, I'll put all the information in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Myers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where you'll find our books, our courses, and everything else we have going on. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.